In 1324, a king left his palace and walked into the Sahara Desert. He brought with him 60,000 people, dozens of camels, each carrying over 100 kilograms of pure gold, servants, scholars, soldiers, and architects. He was going on a religious pilgrimage, and along the way, almost by accident, he broke the economy of an entire region of the world. His name was Mansa Musa. The word Mansa means emperor. He ruled the Mali Empire in West Africa, a kingdom so wealthy that contemporaries struggled to describe it in terms that didn't sound like fantasy. Mali sat on top of the largest gold deposits in the medieval world. It also controlled the salt trade routes across the Sahara. Whoever controlled gold and salt in that era controlled the economy of an entire continent. The empire's cities were remarkable. Timbuktu was not a remote backwater. It was a thriving center of Islamic scholarship, with universities and libraries that drew students and scholars from across the Muslim world. At its peak, the Mali Empire stretched from the Atlantic coast of West Africa across to modern-day Niger, encompassing territory roughly the size of Western Europe. Musa came to power in 1312 in an unusual way. The previous king, Abu Bakr II, had become obsessed with a question that no one could answer. What lay beyond the Atlantic Ocean? He assembled a fleet of 2,000 boats, handed the throne to Musa as his deputy, and sailed west into the Atlantic to find out. He never came back. Not a single ship returned. Nobody knows what happened to him or the fleet. The ocean simply swallowed them. Musa, who had been sitting on the throne as caretaker, was now emperor of the most powerful kingdom in Africa. He was a devout Muslim, and like all devout Muslims, he was expected at some point in his life to make the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. Most rulers made the journey modestly. Musa began preparing for something that had never been done before. For years, he accumulated tribute from across his empire. Gold poured into the capital from every province. Salt convoys arrived from the north. His treasury swelled to a scale that nobody outside Mali had any idea existed. When he finally set out in 1324, he brought 60,000 people with him, 8,000 courtiers, 12,000 servants, soldiers, cooks, doctors, historians, and poets. The caravan stretched across the desert for miles. Each night when they camped, the temporary settlement was the size of a small city. No ruler in living memory had ever moved across the world quite like this. Word spread ahead of them. By the time they reached Egypt, the entire region was already talking. Cairo in 1324 was one of the great cities of the medieval world. The center of the Mamluk Sultanate, a sophisticated empire with centuries of history. The Sultan of Cairo received Musa formally, and then Musa began to spend. He gave gold to the poor in the streets. He tipped servants with amounts that would have kept a family fed for a year. He bought goods at any price merchants named without negotiating. He reportedly gave away 20,000 gold pieces in Cairo alone, then did the same in Medina, then again in Mecca. The problem was that there was simply too much gold. When a commodity floods a market, its value drops. The gold Musa distributed so freely caused the price of gold to collapse across Egypt, the Middle East, and eventually into parts of Europe. Historians estimate that gold lost around 20% of its value in Egypt, and that the inflation he caused lasted for more than a decade after he left. The richest man in the world had accidentally made himself temporarily broke. On the return journey, Musa ran out of gold entirely. He had to borrow from Cairo's moneylenders at high interest rates to fund the trip home. The man whose generosity had crashed the economy of an entire region was now in debt to the merchants of that very region. But the pilgrimage itself was a spiritual triumph. In Mecca, Musa met the greatest Islamic scholars, architects, and thinkers of his era. He didn't just observe them, he recruited them. He invited poets, jurists, mathematicians, and architects to return with him to Mali. The most important recruit was a poet and architect from Andalusia named Abu Ishaq al-Sahili. He had traveled from Muslim Spain to Mecca, seeking a new direction. Musa offered him a fortune to return to Mali and help build something that would last. Al-Sahili accepted. He would go on to design some of the most remarkable buildings in West African history. While Musa was still traveling, his generals had been busy back home. In his absence, the Malian army captured Gao, the capital of the powerful Songhai kingdom to the east. The empire had grown significantly while its emperor was away on a religious journey. Musa changed his route home to visit Gao in person. He received the personal submission of the Songhai king, then continued to Timbuktu. He had left for Mecca as emperor of one of the world's great empires. He returned as emperor of something even larger. The building campaign that followed was extraordinary. Al-Sahili designed a series of mosques and public buildings that used burnt brick, a technique new to West Africa at the time. The Jinguereber Mosque in Timbuktu still stands today, still used for prayer, nearly 700 years after it was built. Musa brought scholars back from his pilgrimage and funded the expansion of Timbuktu's great university, the Sankore Madrasa. At its peak, the university housed up to 25,000 students. Timbuktu became one of the leading centers of Islamic learning and scholarship in the entire world. Trade expanded dramatically under Musa's administration. The new relationships and trade routes established during his pilgrimage opened Mali to merchants and diplomats from Egypt, the Middle East, and even Europe. Word of Mali's wealth spread across the known world. In 1375, European cartographers drew the Catalan Atlas, one of the most detailed maps of the medieval world. In the center of West Africa sat a figure on a golden throne, wearing a crown and holding a gold nugget in one hand and a golden scepter in the other. It was Mansa Musa, the first sub-Saharan African ruler to appear prominently on a European map. Below his image, the mapmakers wrote that this king's empire was so rich in gold that it was impossible to overstate his wealth. Musa ruled until around 1337. By the time he died, the Mali Empire was at the absolute height of its power and cultural achievement. He had intended to abdicate and return to Mecca one more time. He died before he was able to make the journey. His successors could not hold what he had built. The empire was too large, the trade routes too complex, the political pressures too great. Over the following century, the Mali Empire slowly fragmented. The Songhai broke away. New Portuguese trade routes along Africa's coast bypassed the Saharan roads that had made Mali rich. By the mid-1400s, the empire that had once dwarfed Europe was fading. But the buildings survived. The mosques still stand. The universities left behind a tradition of scholarship that shaped West African culture for centuries. Mansa Musa came to power because the king before him sailed into the ocean and never returned. He ruled an empire whose wealth was so vast that nobody then or now has managed to put an accurate number on it. He went on a religious pilgrimage and accidentally destroyed the economy of an entire region just by being generous. And then he came home and built universities and mosques that are still standing today. History forgot him for a long time. He was always there, sitting on his throne in the middle of European maps, holding his gold, waiting for someone to finally tell the story properly.